Welcome to Seeking the Lost with Earl Barnett. This program is sponsored by some area churches of Christ and is dedicated to spreading the everlasting gospel as revealed in the Holy Scriptures. The churches of Christ accept the Scriptures as totally inspired of God and the all-sufficient guide for faith and practice. Therefore, they reject all doctrines of men and rely totally on the Bible to direct their course in serving God. It is our pledge to you that each lesson will be the truth as revealed in His holy word. Mr. Barnett carefully prepares the graphics so you can clearly see the book, chapter, and verse of each lesson taught. We urge you to either copy the scriptures used or record this program for further study. If you have any questions or comments, or if you need prayer, the Seeking the Lost ministry can be reached toll-free at 1-800-390-7734. It is our prayer that Seeking the Lost will be an important source of information about God's Word and will help you more perfectly worship Him. And now, here is Mr. Barnett.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to the Seeking the Lost broadcast. I want you to study with me on this particular subject right here, walking with the Lord. You know, we have a song, When We Walk with the Lord, and I'd like for us to think about that and think about how that we can do this daily and just pay attention to the things that we can do to walk with the Lord. Look at this right here. We find that the people of God, that they had walked away. They had strayed away. The scriptures say, O house of Jacob, come and let us walk in the light of the Lord. You see, they had turned away. For you have forsaken your people, the house of Jacob, because they are filled with eastern ways that adopted those things that has to do with the sinners of the day, the Gentiles. They are soothsayers like the Philistines. And they are pleased with the children of foreigners. They had adopted their ways. They had become immersed in that. And Isaiah saying, O house of Jacob, come and let us walk in the light of the Lord. And the light of the Lord, of course, comes from the Holy Scriptures. Take a look at this. David is in great danger of his life. He professes his confidence in God. You know, he often was in danger. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up that these people had true life experiences about walking with the Lord. David, for you have delivered my soul from death. What does that mean? Well, it means that attempts had been made on his life, but he escaped. Have you not kept my feet from falling? Why? That I may walk before God in the light of the living. Walk before God in the light of the living. Think about that. Then we transfer that over now to the 21st century. And just think what that means, that we have in our mind that we walk before God in the light of the living. We have the Scriptures, which is a great light. It is God's light for us today. Now look at this. In Psalms 89, 14 through 15, righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Mercy and truth go before your face. And then he declares, blessed are the people who know the joyful sound. They walk, O Lord, in the light of your countenance. Think about doing that individually. Think about walking before the Lord. And think about walking in the light of His countenance. That would change lives, wouldn't it? That would make things different in the world. Righteousness and judgment are the foundation of your throne. What if it were different? What if we had a mean God? What if we had a God that just waited for someone to make a mistake so He could just thump him in the head and kill him? You know, you think about that. God is righteous, and God has justice in His laws. Blessed are the people who know the joyful sound. They walk, O Lord, in the light of your countenance. Get advice even from David, the king, who lived about 1,000 years before Jesus was born. Consider this. Who is your lamp? And when I say yours, I mean mine too. But David spoke to the Lord the words of this song on the day when the Lord had delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and the hand of Saul. David had many enemies, and they were out to kill him. And Saul, the king, became jealous of him, and he was out to kill him. But God Almighty preserved David because he was going to make him king one day. He was going to do his will. But he said that he had been delivered from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. Now look at this. 2 Samuel 22 and 29. For you are my lamp, O Lord. David still speaking. The Lord shall enlighten my darkness. You are my lamp, O Lord. You know, living in the day now that we have so many lights, you can actually drive through even a small city, and especially a large city, and not even turn your headlights on. You get away from all of that light, though, you better have good headlights. You're out in the darkness. What if all of those lights were to go down? They were to go out. It would be a very dark world. And it is a dark world for those who refuse the lamp of the Lord, who say, well, I don't need it. I've got plenty of light of the world. And you know, you might liken that to the artificial lighting that we have everywhere. But you turn all that out. What is your guide? And you know, I'm figuratively speaking. You are my lamp, O Lord. The Lord shall enlighten my darkness. You know, sometimes we can experience darkness. It's a moonless night, and we're away from all the artificial lights, and it's very dark, and it's hard to see. In my coal mining days, I used to think, well, maybe I could see. And one of the things that when you're underground, you don't want to happen is for your lamp to go out, which would happen frequently to everybody. But you could use the lamp of somebody else's, follow them. But what if you were in a dark place, your light went out? You can't see. I used to think that, well, maybe I can see, and I would hold my finger just as close to my eye as I could without touching it. You couldn't see it. Total, all-out darkness. For you are my lamp, O Lord. The Lord shall enlighten my darkness. And the darkness of a coal mine, you could liken that into the darkness of a sinful world and of a sinful person. A person who has rejected God Almighty, refused to take advantage of the healing power of the blood of Christ, is in darkness, spiritual darkness. And it's as dark as it can be. Look at this. We need help to walk the walk. Jeremiah 10, O Lord, I know the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man who walks to direct his own steps. You know, spiritually speaking, that's true. If we're going to depend upon ourselves to find out what the will of God is for us, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. But where can we find the way of man? Where can we find the way of man that we can walk? And then we can walk in the light. I know the way of man is not in himself. We can't dream up the way to walk to please you. It is not in man who walks to direct his own steps. So we need help to walk the walk. Where does that help come from? Well, it comes from the Holy Scriptures. My friends, it behooves all of us to read the Scriptures, to digest them, to make them a part of our daily lives. I know the way of man is not in himself. And so it's not in man who walks to direct his own steps. If a man tries that, he's going to walk in darkness. But God gives us light. The help comes through his word. You can tell that. It's a very interesting thing to think about. That how does God speak to us today? Some have thought that God speaks to them perhaps by a dream. He used to speak to people by a dream. Perhaps by direct revelation. Of course, we know that in the scriptures that God has spoken to man directly. But he doesn't do that now, does he? How does God communicate his will toward us this day? And how did God communicate his word even in David's day, 1,000 years before Christ was born? Well, of course, David himself wrote, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Just think about the shepherd boy, that in pitch darkness, that he would be traveling a path in the pitch darkness to check on his sheep, and it would be so dark, and he would learn that he could carry a lamp. And in speaking of the spiritual world, he said, "Your word is a lamp to my feet." How are we going to know what God wants us to do? We got to check the word. Your word is a light to my path. Just think how much help that would be if you're going through a dense forest, perhaps, heading out to a meadow where your sheep were, and it's pitch dark, and you can hardly find your way. And he thought to himself, you know, this is the spiritual side of it, is this, that we don't have to walk in darkness, because he said, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." We learn from the Old Testament, don't it? Psalms 119, look at this. "The entrance of your word gives light. It gives understanding to the simple." Who are the simple here? Well, it's people perhaps like me and you, that we're not simple in the sense that, you know, we don't know what's going on around us. But we're not scholars of the Holy Scriptures either. But then we can be guided. The entrance of your word, how does that happen? How does the entrance happen? How does it get into? Your word gives light. What does the Bible say about this subject here? I read it, and he says, it gives understanding to the simple. Have you ever noticed how the Bible is written? It is written to be understood. You think about the scholarly articles that are written by people who are expert in their field, and they use terms that are so difficult to understand. Almost every sentence you have to stop and go look up what that word means. The Bible's not written that way. The young can understand as well as the old, that they don't have to walk in darkness, that they can read the scriptures which is written to the common man. Think about it. God is not going to break in, though, the entrance of the word. You know, a lot of people I've heard say, well, you know, God came to me. He overtook me. He threw me to the ground with a flash of light. And I know I'm saved because I've seen all that. I was reading one instance, and this person was really sincere. But it was back in the day when, you know, it was rural times. And everybody understood the expression, but it's always amused me that he was telling why he was saved. He had a religious experience that proved to him that he was saved, and he was telling others. And he said, I saw the angel of the Lord, and said he was about the size of a yearling. I couldn't help but smile. About the size of a yearling, and he was standing above the pine trees. And therefore, I have had a religious experience, and therefore I am saved, and I want to become a part of this church. You laugh? Well, actually, that's not the way you get into the church that Jesus built. But it's always amused me, and I'll never forget reading it. That this person said he saw the angel of the Lord, and he's about the size of a yearling. Many of you don't know what a yearling is. It's a half-grown cow or half-grown bull, a yearling. And he said that angel about the size of a yearling. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. He's ready to come in. Come into it. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me. How's that going to happen? You know, the Lord is not here today. He is not in visible form. He is not in physical flesh, is he? But he said, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, Jesus is not going to break in. He is not going to break down the door and force his way into your life. He said, if you just open that door, I will come to him and dine with him, and he with me. God's not going to break down the door. Nothing is hidden from God. We have to remember that, don't we? Psalms 90:8. You have set our iniquities before you. Think about that. And our secret sins in the light of your countenance. What about those secret sins? What about those things that even as Christians we might stumble? What about those? Oh, nobody saw that. I'm going to keep on going. Your secret sins. What is God going to do about that? He said, David said, you have set our iniquities before you. Our secret sins in the light of your countenance. And that is a very sobering thought, isn't it? Well, anyway, David walked the walk, and we can too. For you have delivered my soul from death. Have you not kept my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of the living? The light of the living. I may walk before God. How? Well, in the light of the living. What enlightenment did they have in those days? Of course, they had the Old Testament. We are more fortunate than any generation that has ever existed. Why? We have both the Old and the New Testament. The Scriptures tell us those things are written before, talking about the Old Testament, were written for our learning. But look at here, you have kept my feet from falling. How did you do that? That I may walk before God in the light of the living. Why? It is through the Scriptures, isn't it? And here is the Lord, our strength. Is he mine? Our light and strength. You know what David said? The Lord is my light and my salvation. He is my light and my, whom shall I fear? In other words, if the Lord is my light and my salvation, the Lord is my strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? And unlike David, we're not going to be fighting battles in which that we are in danger of being clubbed to death or a sword thrust through us or a spear. But in the spiritual realm, it's when we fight. And we're fighting a formidable opponent by the name of Satan. And we're going to need the light and the strength of the Lord to be with us. And the confidence that David had, it should be with us too. The Lord is my strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? You know, this is Old Testament. 1 Kings 16. Ahab, Ahab, what are you doing? You remember that Ahab, that he sinned more before God than any other person before him. Came to pass as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam. You remember Jeroboam making the golden calf and said to people that you don't have to go up to Jerusalem to worship. You can worship these calves. How could that be? That the people of God in that day, that they would indeed worship a golden calf, one in Bethel and one in Dan. But he said, as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took as wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and he went and served Baal and worshipped him. This is a person. This is a child of God, Ahab, that he knew better. But after he married Jezebel, he went and served Baal and worshipped him. Surely I'd like to get into the mind of how he felt, knowing that there was one God, a living God, that he would bow himself down to an image of Baal and worship him, knowing he was just an image, knowing the truth. He knew better. Looks like it's for political reasons, isn't it? That he bows down and worships Baal. He couldn't have been sincere, but who knows? Look at this. You know, the kids sing, and all of us have sang, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine." I'm not going to sing for you because I figure you'd turn off the TV. But this little light of mine, you are the light of the world. Wait a minute. Jesus' followers is a light. That's what he said. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. You know, you just can't miss it. I used to fly some, and coming in from Montgomery or South Alabama, I wasn't a good pilot, but in the distance, you knew you was on the right track when you began to see the lights of a city. And on the map, you knew what it was. And the light of the world, you are the light, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. In the darkness of night, when a person flies, he flies over a city, it cannot be hidden. And Jesus says that's what we are. That we're the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. What does that mean? It means that as we are the light of the world, we can't hide that light. We can't snuff it out. We can't put it under a bushel. But we are to be the light of those who have not been saved. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let your light so shine before men. In other words, we're to be that city on a hill. We're to be one of those lights that cannot be ignored, that you may see your good works. How are we going to glorify God? Are we going to go around and insult people and tell them how sinful they are? Or are we going to teach and they will see our good works and they'll glorify your Father in heaven? A lot to be learned about that little song that children sing in classes, Vacation Bible School, and the camps. Let your light so shine before men. What? They'll see your good works. And so if you want to light up, do good. Do some good somewhere. And give the glory to our Father which is in heaven. Light it up. Light and darkness. He says the lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, the whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. Is this not how we look at the world? We look at the world through good or through darkness. Through good or bad, through light or darkness. If therefore that light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? It's a thick darkness upon our soul, isn't it? Let's move along. Light and darkness. And Jesus said, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. What is he talking about? He's talking about an intelligent follower of Christ. He's not walking in darkness. I have come as a light to the world, and whoever believes in me should not abide in darkness. Light and darkness. Ever hear of the armor of light? I've preached so many times on the armor of God, the whole armor of God. And I noticed this, which I had not before. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore let us cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. As far as I know, it's the first time I've ever preached that. Put on the armor of light. Now we know about the armor, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of the faith. We all know that. And the sword of the Spirit. But here he says, put on the armor of light. This is another approach, isn't it? Think about it. Promised to Paul in his mission. Now he had a big one. He told Paul, he said, I will deliver you from the Jewish people and from the Gentiles, to whom I'm sending you to the Gentiles, to open their eyes, to turn them from darkness to light. What does that mean? It meant that he was going to carry the gospel to them, and from the power of Satan to God. That was his mission, to open their eyes, turn them from darkness to light. Well, the devil is still in business. Paul wrote this, but if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine through them. Satan's still in business of hardening people's hearts. Walking as a child of light, Ephesians 5, look at that. Let no one deceive you with empty words, but walk as children of light. We are nearing the end because I'm running out of time. But I want you to think about, and I'll just flash these up here as I am closing. I'd like for you to think about walking in the light as he is in the light. Well, anyway, it has been a wonderful opportunity to study with you. It's Earl Barnett saying you have a good day.
Our God is an awesome God.
You have been watching Seeking the Lost with Earl Barnett. If you need prayer or have comments or questions, feel free to call the Seeking the Lost Ministry at 1-800-390-7734. That's toll free, 1-800-390-7734. Seeking the Lost is sponsored each week by some area churches of Christ. Until next time, may the good Lord bless you and keep you.